afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter. Here on a Jupiter day, Jupiter hour, with Jupiter in Taurus, 7 degrees retrograde, trining Lilith. That's interesting. And the moon is separating from Sextile to this Jupiter moon in 11 degrees Cancer in the 8th house. And ascendant ruled by Jupiter, midheaven ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is also in Jupiter's sign in 28 degrees Sagittarius. Venus 24 degrees Libra, separating from a conjunction with Ketu. Chiron in Aries, and Saturn is a bit of the topic of this episode, in the 4th house in Pisces, with Pluto in 28 degrees in Capricorn. And almost every day I wake up with something to say. I go to sleep, my mind processes things, and then there's something to speak about. So today I woke up with the understanding that Saturn is many things. Oh, it's dedication, it's discipline, it's restriction, it's this. Saturn is also associated with the father, while Jupiter is associated with the bringer of children, which is also the father, the guru, and as well as the child or the seed, simply put. Okay, it's part of how children come to the world. While Mercury is more like the childlike curiosity, the trying again, the language, development of a language, and so on. It's also ruling children. And as Saturn is going through Neptune's domain, okay, Neptune's associated modernly with Pisces, modernly because we didn't know Neptune traditionally. So we knew Poseidon, which was then associated with Jupiter probably. Not just Zeus, but Poseidon's or Pisces. But the thing is that the gods of the sea are also the gods of healing, the cosmic womb, the not chaos. Chaos is more like Aquarius that comes before it actually ruled by Saturn. It has patterns. Chaos has patterns in it. But the actual cosmic water, okay, so before birthing, it's kind of like the water breaks and then a baby, which is Aries, comes to life, the head of the baby. Saturn in this sign is basically the father in the cosmic womb, which is a transit, okay? So it's kind of like you try to put restrictions or to incarnate the baby into life, actually. But Saturn is ruling Pluto that's going over in its domain. And Pluto is a very interesting visitor, okay? Think about having puppies or kittens, yes? They have puppies or kittens, they come to your house, they're the newcomers, but they play around every corner of the house, okay? They poop and pee on everything, okay? It's very Pluto related. People also during pregnancy or during labor, okay, they poop as well. They don't bring just life, also excretion. And they transform every corner of the house, even energetically so. Okay, I had kittens during the war, actually. They were born either a little bit before or during the war. And they simply play at every corner. They will poop at every corner. They will pee at every corner. You think, oh, they probably don't pee where they, where they stay. And it's like, no, surprise, surprise, they do. And what happens in this situation is that you're asked to clean every corner. You also discover your limitations in doing so at the given time. But also, you begin to tend to those places where you never tended to. Okay, so it's like, where is the other puppy? Is it inside or outside? Now they stay at corners. Now you're looking at the corner between the shades that separate the room from from the porch. Okay, and you put the lighter on so until you see it's like, oh my God, is it dead? And you take the freaking the freaking window out so that you see it's alive. Good morning. You've never done this in like the past 2 years or so. Or something falls in the corner of the house. You don't know about it, but then you kind of remove things. There's a puppy there. They make sure they're both at home. It's like, oh, that oil fell. Oh, I prepared that oil. Okay, and there's also the loss and the rejuvenation of things. Okay, so somebody poops on your shirt. It's a really like, oh, this shirt also had stains on it, and I didn't want to throw it out, but now that there's poop on it too, I think it's time to say goodbye. I can't even donate it because even before the poop, because like it's not so dignified to give something that already has said. But it was in my house, so I guess the puppies are right, and I need to throw it out. Okay, this is also the job of Pluto. Okay, Pluto is excretion, it's poop, is the birthing process. Okay, it's something hidden, and then it comes to life. It's rejuvenation. It's compost. Perhaps the example of kittens, okay, more so than children even, because children, in modern society, there's a little baby there, and then it has its own carriage, and then it has its own like diapers, and it doesn't get to do much troubles until it grows up some more. Okay, the kittens, they grow up quicker and they do troubles way quicker, and you get to see the story here way quicker. It's one of the nicest displays of the Pluto archetype that you can have. Okay, because they're so cute, you forgive them for everything they do, and they do everything. Okay, so it facilitates, like kind of like a love buffer that facilitates a transformation. Okay? Saturn right now as the planet that also rules the father, not the father as the bringer of seed. Actually, having Saturn in Jupiter's sign, the state of Netherlands have it, I have it, my mama has it, is actually restricting on sperm count. Okay, because Saturn's limitation, there's also ruling agriculture, but there's also a limitation. Jupiter is seed or semen, so actually a sperm count. It's as simple as that. Okay, it's as simple as that. Jupiter, the planet of seed and growth in Saturn's sign. Okay, then you need to grow things to do with agriculture, or maybe things to do with Jupiter, and that can create the slow growth that you need with this sign. But in general, if Jupiter is the bringer of children, as that which has the seed, Saturn is the father of children. That's which, after they are born, that's the person that gives out the restriction. Okay, Sun is the inspiration. Okay, if Jupiter is the more expansive, vivifying. Yes, when I was in academia, I had one person who was my instructor, not a Me Too case, it's like absolutely not related to that, fortunately. And another person was another type of figure. So my instructor had, I think, Sun in Sagittarius, so it was very Jupiterian. And I have Sagittarius in the 10th house. And he told me, you're right, you do your research about what you love, we'll find where to publish it. Okay, it's very Jupiterian, believing in you, opening. Okay, and it was also this type of like, I don't chase after you, you have to come to me. Yes, and you'd even have to chase him for the feedback sometimes. For me, I wrote on something that was so interesting to him, and he would give the feedback quite quickly because it was just so interesting. But other people, they had to wait. So, which also created problems with the bureaucracy, okay, which is Saturn. But then we have the person who was kind of like responsible on us doing our job in general, it's not instructor, And he was a more Saturnian. He said, well, you have to publish so and so articles to get a job and to continue in this. You have to go to the United States. I don't care how you feel about the United States. If you want to stay in the academy, you have to have a degree from an academia abroad. Right now, it's the United States, unless you got money like to go to. Back then, it was Oxford, but after I've seen what comes out of there, I'm like, okay, save the money. And I love studies. But the thing is, it was like you have to write, look at the Q1s, look at the research, look at what's done, appeal to that. Okay? You need to be publishing. And all of this is very Saturnian. So you think about it, do what you love, we'll find where to publish that. Okay? By a person that absolutely found his way. When it was the whole Me Too, I called him, I said he's in splendid isolation. Because he was not into it, he was not, for at least not that we know, and he was supportive of people, but he was staying in his own bubble, researching, doing what he likes, and so on and so forth. Being activist, but in his own freedom. Whereas Saturn is more aware of what the reality is. If you think about filmmaking, yes, then a filmmaking teacher who is more Jupiterian would tell you, it doesn't matter what the industry is. Anyway, you come to bring something that was not born yet, so do your thing, do you. And this is the best that you can do, right? Do you, will find what to do with that. But remember, you're here to enjoy Jupiter. Yes, whereas Saturn would be like the screenwriter teacher that I've had, screenwriting teacher that we've had. It was like, there is no difference between writing a screenplay and making a chair. Okay, we're doing wood craftsmanship. It's no different. Okay, and when he got to the structure, to the nitty gritty, he said all plots. Okay, talk about film, is actual film, not the documentary film, but documentary is considered as too if they want to be commercial. All plots are a story of going from slavery to liberation. Okay, this stuck with me. I was 21 years old, because you can't study in Israel like at 18 or so. There's something, there's bureaucracy that blocks you from that. Even if you are exempt from army service. And so that stuck with me. It's been 20 years. For the geniusity of this, for the truth of it, for the timeless teaching of it. And it also got me to ask how changes are formed. Yes? So Saturn stands the test of time. It knows what stands the test of time. It knows where you don't want to renovate. You want to, it's like there are places where you can renovate. But there are certain things that you need to keep in structure. Okay? Or if you're doing a brand new project, I'm working with this tincture by Sphere and Sunfield, the Tema Mundi, which is a totally experimental thing. Yes? But you still have to know certain things. You have to know your craft, you have to know the structure, you need to know the tradition before you break the tradition. This is very Saturnian teaching. And now, this Saturn is going through a Plutonian transformation in the house of Saturn. So Pluto going in 2008, going from Jupiter to Saturn, it went from exposing, for example, the misdeeds of Zeus, okay, or the shadow side of gurus, which the generation of Pluto Sagittarius, the Gen Zers, are still tending to. While Pluto in Saturn sign, it also tended to the place where the shade of the father, but the father is supposed to tell you what's real and what's not, what's allowed, what's not allowed. Okay. where do you have limitation? Okay, the person who's supposed to impose your discipline, Pluto is showing their bumhole, literally. It's kind of like, hey, that's the person that told you to da 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 da. Look what they're doing in their spare time. Okay, and Pluto is working together with Neptune. So we have Pluto in Saturn sign, and now this particular transit is Saturn in Neptune sign, and the rulers, the Pluto and Neptune, are kind of dissolving every notion of the Saturn leaking information. Again, Saturn cannot, and that's why I said Saturn finds it difficult to fend for itself, but it goes through a much needed revolution. And when it comes to actually being a father, the concept of the father is going through a revolution, whether it's by same-sex marriages that we had since 2015 in certain countries, whether it's by transgenderism. The children that are being born are different, and so the concept of the father has to adapt. We can no longer raise children today. Okay, to the mother it is the moon, or ruler of fourth or 10th, but we can no longer, and also there are single moms that are playing this Saturn role. Okay, if you grew up to a single parent, man or woman, your parent was the moon and the sun and the Saturn and the 10th house and the 4th house all together. Okay, so you got the combination of these. So also the astrology changes, and so we can't grow children today with the same father concepts or parenting that we grew them 250 years ago, which was the last time Pluto was approaching Aquarius. And so this transition is quite difficult for anybody who plays the role of the father or the parent that is supposed to provide with a framework where somebody can grow into. Okay, somebody, it's like, how much does this person need resilience? How much is too much? Okay, and in many cases, the most deadly mistake of the father is that it wants to instill discipline and boundaries. Granted, it is not abusive himself, but it wants to instill discipline and boundaries. But what is supposed to make the child resilient and tolerable for the harsh reality of life actually kills the child, and then we have the father that loses the child. I talked yesterday about the 27 club. But Saturn in Jupiter sign can also be about conception, because it's another, you think about Jupiter in Saturn sign, it's kind of like the seed needs expansion, and it's like its boundaries before we even begin. How do I, where am I? Okay, or there's not that many of us here. But Saturn in Pisces is pretty much the inversion. It's kind of like the inversion on the same story. Where you have to, it's like, okay, so which one of you is coming down to this earth? And then there is this conversation, kind of like the spirit of the child. It's kind of like, okay, which one of you Saturns is a neurodivergent accepting of my gender, which is a silver bullet ray, accepting of my nationality, which is born and made in Fumalaud, and Saturn's like, the fuck are you talking about? Okay, and then Pluto on the other side, he said, that looks weird. May I remind you what you do for a living? Now, whatever somebody does for a living, they're invested in pretty much the perpetuation of pedophilia and other atrocities for the merit of the structure of taxation, Saturn, long-term investment, stocks, Saturn, and so on and so forth. So there's this interesting conversation between the concepts here, where the father is evolving to actually bring a child to the world. There's some evolution and to some extent even revolution. Okay, now Jupiter is co-present with Uranus and Saturn. We're going to have the Jupiteranus, which is very unexpected, quite radical, highly religious, or atheistic, or dogmatically atheistic in a religious way. So in general, it's kind of like this day and age, while Pluto is in Saturn's sign to begin with, the notion of being a father, fatherhood, and with Saturn in Jupiter's sign, is actually concepting, actually having children, actually having connection between the part of you that is bringing in the semen, okay, and maybe the philosophy of children, what your beliefs around children, also your beliefs around the child grows to be, what gender, and what you think about all these genders, men, women, queers, all the variety that exists now. Saturn is kind of like how you raise your child, what you demand from your child. And if, for example, there are children where, they can play around all day, but if you set them to do something productive, they will enjoy it even more. If you think about the singer Beyonce, okay? She was a prodigy child. And she, from age 3, she knew she wanted to be a singer, and her parent took it as a project, and she worked her ass off. She worked so hard that to bring the first baby, she had to change her whole lifestyle, had to take 1 year vacation where she never took actual vacation in her entire life. Okay, so you think about, you don't think about Beyonce's child labor usually, but there was a lot of sacrifice made, and it's not like she's not happy with it. It's not like maybe she would do things a bit differently with Blue Ivy, but it's not like she's unhappy with her endeavors or with what she's done in life, okay? Whereas you put some other children that have musical talent and whatnot through this cycle, they will unalive themselves, okay? One of the most famous words of Gen Zers, which is the generation of Pluto in Sag, to some Pluto in Capricorn probably as well, is to unalive yourself. And so Saturn here faces a very difficult dilemma. Am I? So I'm just informed that Henry Kissinger died at the age of 100. So yes, that's we don't know if he was killed by the cult or if he actually died. But this is so. Rest in peace, Henry Kissinger, the centurion. I don't know how I said it. Yes, but I talk about death. Yeah, and so think about Saturn and as the father. Then Henry Kissinger, I believe, is the father of Realpolitik. When we talk about the father of ideas, that has its pros and cons and has its context and so on and so forth. Yes. But when you think about the more general notion of the Saturn notion, it's like, am I being too strict? Am I being so strict that I'm stifling the life out of my child? Or am I being strict enough so that my child will be achieving something real in this world and be able to do the things that they want to do? It's just that they will have the security, the framework to work with. So in that sense, Saturn governs the time, and a part of the role of a parent is to govern the time. One of the greatest teachings of Tom Jacobs, who's working with people who deal with suicide or people whose loved ones committed suicide, and is a channel and a medium about the topic of suicide. And he says, teaching of the chakras, to be grounding yourself, okay, is to say yes, no, and maybe according to what's true to you. Yes, so many people are dead because they couldn't say so. It's not just sexual violence. It's just the ability of that is the sex chakra, the connection chakra, to say yes, no, and maybe when it is appropriate. And when I was going from after the Me Too, and I said, I don't want to be living a whole life of what was done to me. I want to do what is like, let's explore what is pleasure culture. So I was selling courses about sexual education and so on to in an international business, that were encouraging self-pleasure and finding the pleasure within yourself before you come to connect with another. And one of the greatest teaching was that it's about becoming this person that whatever was in the past is so that we will be able to say yes, no, and maybe according to our wish. Yes, so will and consent is important to practice, to allow this. Yes, but also to express ourselves, to say the yes, no, and maybe, because there are people who respect the yes, no, and maybe, and we don't want to keep ourselves from living this life. Okay? And when I try to tell this to a woman who is raising teenager children, and she's telling me like, but I tell my children no all the time. I tell my children no all the time. I have to if I tell myself no many times. Okay, so she's bringing the more Saturnian concept. And then how much of this Saturnian is correct, okay? A part of willing consent is to say to yourself no. It's like, hey, I'd really like to touch this. Oh, I need to ask them if they want me to touch them, if they're comfortable with that. Okay? And then you try to ask, and it comes out awkward, but this is more the Mercury, to try and try again. Things, rejection, which is another thing that Pluto deals with, fear of abandonment, rejection, Neptune, isolation, Saturn is also isolation, and resilience to that. And the Saturn is needed for the Jupiter, and the Jupiter is needed for the Saturn. Now, when we're dealing with a society that has been wounded with restrictions being so restrictive that the life perish, as well with places where there were lack of restrictions, so much so that people died as the result of somebody's freedom. At this day and age, the entire concept of what it's like to do the fathering or the restriction part, okay, or even if you are a woman, doesn't matter. Okay, when you set a boundary, this is a Saturn. It's also a Mars, yes, but usually you set the boundaries not as a Martian to your children, but as a Saturnian. It's like, okay, this is there. You might not be able to understand why you can't at 13 go with this 70 years old person to their crib, even though they have nice drugs to give you for free that cost me a lot of money, and you think it's a good deal. Yes, but you might not understand why this is not allowed. But right now you will just have to obey this rule. And if I'm wrong, then this will have to stand the test of time. But this is my decision. I'm your parent. I'm not allowing you in with this person. Okay, but sometimes it can be in detriment. And the dilemma is eternal. But with Pluto, there's something really, really changing about this dilemma. Okay. The sets of restriction change, and with the Saturn Pisces that I talked about yesterday, then The children change, what they need is changing. The restrictions that they are that are in favor of them are changing, and the restrictions that no longer serve are changing. And so the character of the father is evolving. Now it doesn't matter which house Saturn is in your chart. For me it is in the 11th, so I make a talk about this. It's like in the community, but for you it can be a different house. Okay, and I have Saturn in my 9th house, so it's a teaching about this happening. But Saturn, it can also be a 5th house. And so the notion is transforming, and Saturn here in Pisces finds it difficult to fend for itself, because getting this Jupiterian zone to apply to Saturnian restrictions can be the most deadly in Pisces. Okay, these are the children that you can find in their bedroom, that they unalive themselves with the very pills that you have ordered them to take, because the psychiatrist told you if they don't take this pill they will die, but they forgot to mention that if they will take this pill they will have an increased desire to kill themselves, and so they will steal somebody's sleeping pill and take the entire pack and wake up in the morning, and that was not aging well to enforce this restriction on them. When they went missing, you don't hear from them anymore. Okay? And so Saturn here, we need compassion in this situation for Saturn itself that's going through this. Because the intention for Saturn is so that this tree will grow to be resilient, and many years, and trees are ruled by Jupiter. Okay? That this tree will grow and sustain and be resilient and won't be, swayed by life's turbulence all that much. Yes? But if you're too strict, the child dies. Whenever Saturn is kind of like in Jupiter sign or in Mercury sign even, then the child can literally die. Yeah, in Mercury the child might have the know-how. Okay, it's kind of like, I know that if I combine this with that, okay, I had a friend in university that went through traumas, and they had they tried to unalive themselves a couple of times, and their parent was a researcher in chemistry. Okay, so they had the know-how. It was like, I know if I do that and that within 3 seconds, I'm poof. And there are many things that people think about people who have addictions, but also people who are dealing with suicide. One day she took the entire pack of sleeping pills of her father, and then the next morning she got up to give a presentation and got kind of like a straight A on that. So yet another understanding of how people sometimes die by the restriction, because they're being too Saturnian on themselves, and then eventually they can't take it anymore. So right now with Pluto, it's exposing the taboo things to talk about. That things were sending your child to boarding school, and with that child being raped and murdered, or raped and unaliving themselves, which is another form of murder. That time where thinking that the army will make a man out of your child, ended with your boy being raped in the unit, and nobody being able to talk about this, and then somebody being hospitalized forcibly. um, and whatever comes out of that. Um, and all of these strict Saturn was like, the strict is the road, you need to be resilient, and all these times, and all those people dead, and all those babies dying, and all those people dying with Saturn return, which I talked about in yesterday's episode. But this taboo is not to shame Saturn. Eventually, it is to transform and be more inclusive of the life that we are bringing, because it cannot be that, would you like to raise your children, even if your child is an engineer, their girlfriend left him, he might listen to some song that will get him through that, okay? That artist that played that song, do they really, and what happens if he later, learns that this artist died at 27 because nobody could contain him in the real world? And like, oh, the person that got you through this is dead. And as a person who's very much was very close to the songs of Nick Drake and definitely got me through a lot, I'm like, I am almost 40. I lived past 27. I lived past 36. And it's also important to name these things that I understand. And when as an astrologer somebody asks me, oh, was Saturn in Pisces means the death of these artists and so on and so forth, it's like, what does it mean, what is, and they think about the music that they listened to when their friend broke up with them, that got them through rage, or the song that they played at the wedding, or I don't know, or the music they listened to when somebody lost someone dear or whatnot. It means a lot to people, and it has value in our lives, so much so that when we, on a humanitarian level, we make this perish, people are being less resilient also at the next frontier, which is all your engineers that had a breakup with their girlfriend, and the only way to deal with it is to play that type of music that gets them through the breakup. Now they're not resilient. Okay? Saturn is also death, separation, all these things. And so it is timely to say that, because the very notion of Saturn is evolving. And Pluto is wrapping up in Capricorn. Capricorn is most associated with that restrictive father, while Aquarius, it has its restrictions, yes, but it also is an air sign. It has way more space in the framework. Okay, it has way more space in the framework. Sometimes it means you went through your Capricorn maturation. Now you are resilient enough. We can let you in to do your antithesis. Okay, you've learned the convention. You're good in the convention. Now you need to break the convention, which can also be an existential crisis, because by now you've learned to respect the convention. And it can be a bit of creating your own structure now. But when Pluto is still in Capricorn and Saturn is in Pisces, it's a very timely thing to talk about how the very notion of being a father is evolving. And note that this conversation took place on a Jupiter. Okay, I was thinking about this on the hour of Saturn of the previous night, yes, of Sol, which is also associated with the father, but it takes place on a Jupiter. Okay, very perhaps lucky, perhaps positive, perhaps although Jupiter is retrograde, perhaps timely, even optimistic, a notion within all that. And a compassionate and graceful approach also to those father archetypes, and it doesn't matter, you can be the mother that's playing this limitations role, and the understanding that the compassion is needed, that the understanding that the good intent behind these restriction in many cases exists. Yes, there are the cases, okay, there are the cases. I'm not saying that people didn't, and then there are the children that are hurt by the father, by the violence, sometimes many types of violence. But in a lot of cases, it was simply a restriction that is no longer up to speed with what needs to happen, so that this child will bring their gifts. And to say, well, this child was born to die, I think is not dealing with it on a societal level, on a parental level, in a way that is, because eventually this child died because whether it was older or so, it died because it internalized this approach of, oh, maybe I was born to die. Okay? And while there are countries, I'm half Dutch, there is in Netherlands a process where people can get assisted suicide due to emotional stuff. Yet having visited the Netherlands, I can also say that there is place to improve upon the stress of life as a society. It's very important that people have the freedom to decide and so on. They have to go to a lot of doctors, try a lot of beta blockers that are not the road to life, and they will usually try to unalive themselves before that. So there's nothing to be overly hopeful as to. But there is also the understanding that many people are in this situation because of things that do need to change in society, that needs to be even more inclusive. Yes, also to the creative types. And although Nederland is associated with the painters, is associated, when I came to Schiphol, then the first advertisement, you always see a bank advertisement. They only want to have the money to they have the money to publish. But it was the ING, and Orange, of course. I think it was with the lion. It said, "Creators, do your things. Right? Storytellers, do your thing." And I felt like I'm coming home with this, and I was homeless at the time. So I was like, it's a bank. I know this is just words, but this is something that was speaking to my soul. It was straining on a chord with it. They did a very good copywriting job there. Okay? But we also need to, it cannot be that the person finds it difficult to dance in public, or finds it difficult to break a certain rule, and for fear to not be accepted. So artists, they die before they get to produce something. And Netherlands is known for its creative artists. Like this is a national treasure. Speaking about, it's not for nothing that the bank writes this, okay? It's a national treasure, but we also have to respect our artists and for them to live good as well, because they're not a Ford car. They're not a Ford car. It's something very good. The first car I wanted to buy to my mama, never got to, was a Ford Focus. I saw a silver Ford Focus, and I said, it looks beautiful. And I said, oh, this is very nice. And what's nice about Fords is they are also affordable. It's like, I was dreaming about, buying a Maserati. It's like, that's supposed to be achievable. I'm supposed to be able to do that. I'm supposed to be able to achieve that dream. It's not, but a Ford's car are also manufactured in a factory. And while this factory allows, Tom, Dick, and Harry to ride a Ford, which is important and beautiful, there were also the problem with the employees, And there's also if we constrain ourselves to what we can do in this kind of like machine type, and now we have it with AI, although AI has a lot of creativity, but if we constrain ourselves to what can be done by a person in society, to the industrialized society, which is the risk of 15-minute city. Okay, there's nothing wrong about living close to the supermarket and the pharmacy and the coffee and the this. Some people are city people. Not everybody feels like, and you know, what is the complaint about Americans? They don't travel. Why? Because you need so much gas to travel to the airport from your village that you don't get to travel. You don't get to sit. And you know who are the most racist people? Are the people that don't meet foreigners. You know, if let's say, I don't know, you tell me it is in your culture to wed girls at 13 and this and that, just like I can tell a Bedouin person, and I did, that all these crimes we see that Bedouin and the Arabic Israelis before the war in Israel were getting murdered by their own society. So yes, before this, they were the children, the girls that are being wed and are buried in the sand. Nobody paid attention, and then they became to women, and so a woman was murdered. Nobody paid attention. Now when it happens to men, it happens by the dozens, as it happened to women. I could tell this to a person because we live together, because he knows that I'm not coming to judge or to not allow the culture, because I actually care about those men that are being killed and those women that are being killed, those children that are being killed. And if I see a pattern here, and if I see that this sense becomes dune of sense when this happens, and when it is reversed, then it suddenly becomes green, then I can say this, yes? But if there was acres and acres and acres between us, I would think, oh, maybe they probably want to kill me, and they would think I want to kill them, or they would idealize. Okay, so they coming to save me, I'm coming to save them. Okay, that's usually what works. So I'm not saying that having cities is bad, the travel in the world is bad. No, I would not be the person that I have, not even for my very limited travel experience. I would not be the person that I am, would not have the outlook that I have, and I'm very grateful. But there is also the notion that some people are not made for these 15 minutes. Some people do need to hug a tree every once in a while, or to walk in the forest, and it's good for the immune system for most people. Yes, keep allergies away and stuff. But when we make something too extreme, and when we don't allow the back and forth between those extremes, we get a lot of troubles. Also in orthodoxy, which is also related both to Jupiter with religion and also a religion that can be radical, because Jupiter is expansive, it increases stuff, and orthodoxy, which is Saturn, get traditional. Yes. With all the restrictions that there are in Orthodox society, we have a problem now, actually with the very Hasidic stream that lives in my village. But not only them, that there are certain cases of child offense against children, okay? Sexual offense against children. And the children are kept with the offender. And and because the society is so closed, and because they're linked to quite big structures, okay, that govern the entire country. And so even a lawyer that stands for human rights had to ghost on the case. Okay, she doesn't say there's only so much, but she mentions in some way that for another case that there need to be lawyers from abroad attending to this. Okay, this is the most she could mention. And this is a person who is like, if Peter R. de Vries was the bulldozer in Netherlands for cases of murder that are unresolved, and she is for the people who have had, misuse or a sexual offense or all kinds of things. And even she discovers everything because she meets those cases, and even she had to ghost on a case. And so this is also, Pluto Saturn is exposing those taboos, where it's like with all the restrictions that come so that people will not corrupt themselves, so to speak. When there is a case in such a close society, then it's becoming almost impenetrable. And the child is left in the situation. This is also true to other types of closed societies, like secret societies. Now, secret societies might not necessarily be about, pedophilia, and sometimes it's just, that when something has to be kept secret, then if something bad happens, it's way more difficult to come out of it, which is why we need to reduce stigma around societies. You say, this is my Dutch nationality speaking from me, even though I grew mostly in Israel, and I will say, okay, but I think this is a valid truth, because if people don't have this secrecy, somebody is gay, okay, they're not raping anyone, they're not doing anything, not abusing anyone, they are gay, or somebody is non-monogamous, okay, they're non-monogamous, okay, again, they don't come to. If they live in society, they have a stigma on it. Now they have to try to fit into something that may not fit, and then they have to lie about who they are to themselves and to others. And there's a lot of heartbreak that comes along the way. And if somebody from another culture comes and they think, oh, you have to be monogamous, or if they loved me, they would be monogamous, or they're going to be monogamous, it's going to show that they love me. So it's like, are you monogamous in your orientation? Seek for what you can live with. We fall in love with all kinds of people, have connections with all kinds of people. Who can I have a structure? Okay. This is also a Saturnian approach. This is also a Saturnian approach. And so Saturn also rules commitment. It also rules the ring. And many people, they do the ring because of children. Yes? Now, as this topic is being evolved, taboos are being, a lot of tea is being spilled, but it's not about the tea spilling. It's about genuinely there are children trapped there in those structures. You want to be Orthodox, be Orthodox. But it cannot be that the child doesn't have the right to exit a certain orthodoxy, or a certain secret society, or a certain group of people. Then is when we say this is a cult. The cult is difficult to get out, or you get isolated and annihilated from anything if you leave, okay? And those things are also to do with the restrictions and the fathering style or the parenting style of Saturn. And then for some it is maybe growing more traditional, where they weren't. Yes, I grew up with parents that they were having two different nationalities, and one of the things I was taught, whether it's true or not, was like, hey, like when you are two different people, society is kind of waiting on you, and it's very difficult to live like that, and kind of like marry your own kind. Not the way that attractions in my life were sparkled. There were other problems with relationship in my life, but it's like it was not. Usually, it was some otherness that also involved a culture or a nationality or something like this. But then some people are actually becoming perhaps more restrictive, or say, oh, maybe we shouldn't have restricted, or maybe my parents, they were not restrictive with me at all, now I need to be more restrictive. This can also be, okay, Saturn rules karma. If you've been doing more on this side of restriction, you can lose some children. And hopefully it would not be the actual loss. This is why I'm making this video, so that if somebody listens to it, then they go through it by a conversation that's difficult for them to listen, rather than an actual child dying or an actual loved one dying. But there is also the other side, of course, and that is, the other side of restriction, the conversation. Should children, should a child this young wear this outfit? Okay, if you look at Blue Ivy dancing next to Beyonce, so Beyonce can wear whatever she wants and do whatever move she wants. She's an old woman, but you see how Blue Ivy is very much kept. Okay, she's 11. She got no business wearing them clothes, and and doing the move. Versus, you see the daughter of Madonna. She's way less restrictive about the type of moves that her daughter, pretty much the same age, makes on a song. She actually collabed with Beyonce on this song. It's called voguing. Okay, so her 11-year-old, it's not that Blue Ivy can't do voguing. It's a different decision, and we don't know. It's like, should an 11 years old do voguing that's considered provocative or sexually provocative? Or maybe it's kind of like, she can move whatever she wants. It's a play for her. She will grow into her sensuality. It shouldn't be a reason she shouldn't be feeling comfortable with that. And it's on us to change the way we look at things, rather than to say, oh, this child should not be doing this. Okay? These are questions. Well, we can't ignore the fact that Blue Ivy is dancing completely differently, would be making completely different moves, and you can see how she kind of like, she could make all those moves, but there's what she's restricted to do. And it can also be the preference of the child eventually. The child says, well, I prefer that my parent protects me in this way. I feel cared for. Let's say I have a Venus in Capricorn. I feel cared for when they restrict me in this way. Rather than there's some other child that say, okay, my parents should never have restricted my moves. Now every time I wiggle my, I wiggle for my very willingly consensual adult responsible person, I feel like I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing. It's like, what's this shit for? Okay, so those questions arise too. And Pluto is very much about exposing the bumhole of every household, including our own, okay, and exposing us to our limitations, but also changing our limitations, and also reminding us, okay, if we are too restrictive, reminding us that, hey, you could lose this person that you're trying so hard to impose something on, so that you can create resilience. You could lose them. While on the other hand, kind of like, hey, perhaps some rules here are needed, and perhaps some restrictions here are good, and so it is a tricky question. And I think compassion for this Saturn figure here is also needed, and the notion of being that Saturn is evolving and transforming, and Pluto finalizing its move in Capricorn is absolutely not finalizing its move in Saturn ruled signs. Again, Saturn will still be, I believe, in Pisces when that happened. It was coming to conjunct Neptune. That's kind of, and then Saturn does rule death and the act of unaliving oneself, and so on and so forth. A key structure to this is that usually, if it is about death, it's the restriction of something, and usually it's something that requires a bit more flexibility, so that there will be life there will be movement there. And so it's very likely, so I'm not, but it's very likely that thing. And if you want to instill a sort of like a discipline or a dedication, it's kind of like, hey, pick yourself up, then it really is about making sure that you could be given this discipline about kind of like a hobby or something that the person who's dealing with that really likes to do. So it's kind of like, hey, something that you used to enjoy, and be attentive. Like listening is validating is very important. Validating, listening is very important. Um, and I can tell you one thing. Except for one case where some woman said I was walking naked in the street, so they hospitalized me forcibly, and she was content with that. Um, and that was like her perception. Some other person said I was walking naked in the street, and this is something I wanted to say about this. This was conscious decision, yes, but in her case, she seems to be holding that perception, and I did not meet people who told me, you know, what really made me tick is I was forcibly hospitalized, and then when I got out of there, I decided I'm going to get on my own 2 feet. Okay? Those stories I don't hear. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but those stories I don't hear. The stories that I do hear have a cemetery in them. So this is, and let it be said, even people who have what you call psychosis, which is getting that awful, then when they are in an environment that supports them, suddenly they're like channeling this, so that even the voices become kind. Okay, so this is my humble contribution to the death topic, in as much as Saturn is involved. I hope this was helpful.